Hello everybody and welcome back to Vehicles of War Thunder. So it's been around about 40 years since last time I posted one of these videos. But the reason for that is quite simply that sometime after recording the last one, I stopped enjoying my time playing War Thunder, so I took a long break, periodically coming back to the game to play a match or two just to see if I was enjoying the game again. That typically did not last for very long, hence the reason why it's been 4 years. The most recent time I did one of these, come back to the game, see if I enjoy it again, was late November 2020. And so far as of recording this video at the end of March, I have found that I've been enjoying the game, at the very least, slightly more than I've not been enjoying it. So I've stayed around for a few months now. But on to the actual topic of this video itself, which is the M2 light tank. In War Thunder, there are three variants of this vehicle. There are three variants of this vehicle that are available. All three are in the American tech tree. There is the M2A4, which is one of the two U.S. Reserve tanks. This variant does have a premium version. There's really nothing particularly special about it, beyond it has a bit of a special camo for the American 1st Armored Division. The other variant is the M2A2. I do want to preface this real quick by mentioning that outside of the armament, finding any real specifications for any model other than the A4 has been difficult, if not impossible. I can't say with certainty why that is. If I had to make a guess, I'd say it's probably a case of lost documents. But it's always possible that I've just outright missed the actual documents. But I don't think that's super likely because I have found technical manuals for some other vehicles, some of which I want to assume without looking into it probably did not see nearly as much service as some of the other vehicles that are from around that time period. But let's go ahead and hop into the history of this tank. So during the interwar period following the First World War, the concept of the tank underwent a bit of an evolution, seeing a desire for smaller, light tanks compared to the monsters of the First World War. Two tanks in particular influenced this concept, those being the French Renault FT-17 and the British Vickers 6 tons. As a result of this evolution and the influence of these two tanks, the US Army charged Rock Island Arsenal with developing a new light tank prototype, which was known as the light tank T2E1. That tank was the culmination of several previous attempts at light tanks, namely the T1 and T2 prototypes, both of which were very much akin to the British Vickers 6 tons. This prototype was compact by the standards of the time and relatively lightweight. The prototype sported a one-man turret armed with a single 50 caliber heavy machine gun. Later in 1935, the US Army adopted the tank into service as the M2, formerly as the light tank M2. The initial production model was known as the M2A1, however, after only 10 units of this model were produced, the US Army changed its vision for the tank and called for a redesign with no fewer than 2 machine guns, each in individual turrets. This resulted in the M2A2, which the troops dubbed the Mae West, due to the double turret design. From what I can find, Mae West was a famous actress of the era, and she was considered to be busty for the era. And so, because of the double turret design, the troops decided to dub the tank as a nickname, basically after the actress. One of these turrets housed a single 50 caliber Browning M2 heavy machine gun, and the other turret next to it housed a single 30 caliber Browning M1919. This model had 239 units produced. The maximum armor thickness for the M2A2 and possibly the A1, though I cannot confirm this, was 16 millimeters. In 1936, with the Spanish Civil War raging, the battlefield showed that machine gun-only tanks had a limited purpose in modern warfare, and this fact would eventually reach the United States. 2 years later, in 1938, it was decided to improve the armor of the M2A2 to a maximum thickness of 22 millimeters to revise the suspension to improve the off-road performance, resulting in the M2A3, of which only 72 models were produced before the US finally got the news that maybe we shouldn't be doing machine gun only tanks. So later in 1938, the US Army decided to revise the M2A3, replacing the two-turret all-machine gun design with a new cannon-armed turret. At the time, the only viable cannon was the standard infantry 37mm M5 anti-tank gun that was already in service, though some modifications were made to make the barrel length shorter as a result of an idea that when you would move the turret around, there was a chance that your barrel would hit a tree, and that would thus damage the gun and potentially prevent you from firing. So some modifications were made to reduce the barrel length. To save time on designing a turret, it was decided to reuse, though with some modifications I believe, the M1A1 combat car's turret. This model was designated as the M2A4, and besides the new gun and turret, it had 5 30 caliber machine guns, one that was coaxial in the turret, one that was an AA pintile turret, which is the turret you see on the back, two machine guns in the sides, in sponsons on the sides of the hull, and one in the nose hull. Well, one was a forward machine gunner based in the hull. It also increased the armor to 25mm on everywhere on the tank except for on the roof and the bottom of the tank. They also swapped out the existing engine, though I could not find any information as to what engine that was, for the Continental W670-9A 7-cylinder gasoline engine, which delivered 250 horsepower. As a result of all these upgrades, it came in at a total battle-ready weight of 11.6 tons, or 12.8 short tons. It also had a max speed of 35 to 36 miles per hour, which equates to 56 to 58 kilometers an hour, with a max range that some of my sources claim of 68 miles or 110 kilometers, or 200 miles or 320 kilometers. If I had to make a guess, this is a case of those sources not specifying what they mean when they're listing their range. So if I had to make a guess, comparing it to other vehicles of roughly the same time period, namely the Panzer II, the 68 miles is likely the cross-country range, while the 200 miles is the range when on a road. This model by far saw the most number of units produced at 375 units being produced and delivered. Now, this vehicle did see some combat, though it was very limited from what I can find. And it was specifically limited to the M2A4 model, with the M2A1, A2, and A3 models being kept on American soil for training. With the A4 getting to fight in World War II as part of the American 1st Tank Battalion during the fighting at Guadalcanal, February 1943 to August 1943. The only other operator of this vehicle was the British, who originally placed an order for 100 tanks, though after receiving 36 of those tanks, they decided to cancel that order in favor of the M3. There is some evidence, at least from what I can find, that those 36 tanks that the British received were used as part of the British Army's 7th Hussars and 2nd Royal Tank Regiment to fight in the India and Burma campaigns against the Japanese 14th Tank Regiment. Now, as for how this tank performs in game, I do want to note, and my memory might be wrong here, but if my memory serves me correctly, back when they originally added in the American ground tree, the M2A2 was a reserve tank, I believe. However, at some point it was decided to replace it in favor of the LVT. As a result, the M2A4 and the LVT are now the American ground reserve vehicles, but like I said, if my memory serves me correctly, the M2A2 and the M2A4 were the original pair. But that changed. Why exactly, I can't say, because I honestly have no idea. And it's also possible, again, that I'm just misremembering. Now, as for how these vehicles, like I said, perform in game, the M2A2 is, as you saw earlier, a very, very fast vehicle. able to pretty quickly get from your spawn onto the capture zone. Basically, it's almost like a reserve tier. Well, not necessarily reserve tier, because it's actually a 1.0 battle rating. Explicitly noted as a 1.0, not as reserve, which is technically 1.0. But it's basically a 1.0 R3 in a sense. It's got speed going for it. It doesn't have a whole hell of a lot of armor. However, it also doesn't have particularly good armament. It's sufficient for the battle rating, but it's not particularly good either, all things considered. It should be noted that the turrets, if an enemy gets on your side, you're pretty limited in your ability to engage. Particularly because you're only going to be able to use one of your two turrets. So if an enemy gets on your side, the M2A2 is kind of screwed, and especially if they get on the side with the 30 caliber. In my opinion, the 30 caliber is woefully underpowered for this battle rating. Even though it's 1.0/reserve, it's still pretty crap, all things considered. However, the 50 cal is generally sufficient. As you saw earlier, it was even able to kill Swedish vehicles. And Swedish vehicles, their reserve stuff, actually have decent armor on them. Much like the Germans also have pretty decent armor. So the M2A2 is an okay vehicle. It's fast, you can very quickly get onto a capture point with it and cap it, potentially before the enemy even knows what's going on. But the M2A4 is the much better vehicle. Armed with that 37mm cannon, it is more than sufficient in knocking out anything you'll see. In fact, you'll see in a little bit that I sort of get a last stand moment going on, dealing with some enemies. So, yeah. And the speed of the A4 is nothing to slouch at. Sure, it's slower because of the heavier armament and the additional armor compared to the M2A2, but it's still pretty damn fast, all things considered, for this battle rating. Able to, much like the M2A2, actually get onto a cap with relative ease. Unlike the M2A2, however, it's actually able to very easily deal with pretty much any opponent you run into by the simple fact it has a cannon instead of dinky little machine guns. Dinky little machine guns that don't have the best firing arcs, to be completely honest. And again, part of that is a limitation from that they're in separate turrets and they're not able to both look in the same direction if you have to look to the side. So yeah. The M2A2 is not my go-to vehicle if I had to pick a vehicle to use at low tier. However, the M2A4, oh boy, I actually really did enjoy using it. Admittedly, some matches were better than others, though I attribute this partly to just playing reserve, and so a lot of the times you don't get the best of teams in some cases. As you'll notice, the enemy teams that particularly these that you see in the footage here, they're not the greatest, to be honest. It was sort of seal clubbing, if we're being completely honest here. And I'm willing to be honest about that. Some of these were sort of seal clubbing. But nonetheless. So, I'm not quite sure what vehicle I plan to cover next time. I have contemplated potentially covering the M3 and then the M5, basically the successors to the M2 here. But I'm not 100% certain if I want to do that. Each of those tanks would be a different video, because while they do have a number of similarities, they do have a number of differences as well. However, I may decide not to do that just because it's a little too similar back to back, and thus may decide to look at other options. I have also contemplated potentially doing the Italian ground troops, because I do find that they're actually pretty decent for what they are. They're not the greatest, much like these. They're okay. They got decent armor. It's not the greatest, and in fact you'll see here that I go up against one of them. But I do kind of get screwed by the hitbox here of this vehicle. The reality is my shell should have very easily passed over it, but for whatever reason the hitbox of the destroyed tank in front of me, not the greatest. Like I said, those things have decent armor. They also have decent guns. For whatever reason, the premium version of their Italian reserve tanks actually has less gun depression than the non-premium versions. I'm not sure what the deal is there, and I don't notice any difference in the actual design of the tank. It's literally the exact same tank, just for some reason it has less gun depression. But that'll be it for this video. I will see you all next time. Quick reminder, I do have Patreon and Discord, so if you enjoy the content on the channel, those are the easiest and best way to support the channel when it comes to the Patreon. So I would love it if people would go there, but there's no requirement, of course. I will continue to produce videos. Not going to necessarily quantify that by specifying Vehicles of War Thunder because, well, that's entirely dependent upon me enjoying War Thunder, which isn't always the case, to be honest. It's very much a game where some battle ratings are hell for certain countries. Some more than others. As for my Discord, that is my go-to place for posting about channel happenings, so I do highly recommend you join that if you want to be able to stay updated on channel happenings. But that'll be it for this video. Like I said, I will see you all next time, and you will see shortly in, I don't know, maybe about a minute, I'm not sure, on the timeline on here, a bit of a last stand moment here in the M2A4. Like I said, the M2A4 is a great tank. The M2A2, it is sufficient. It is not my go-to vehicle if I want to play a reserve American tank, or rather a low-tier American tank. But the A4, oh yeah, this thing is wonderful. It really is. You know, again, good speed, good armor, good armament. Those are, you know, normally it's a case of you got 3 choices for speed, armor, and armament, and you can only pick 2. This thing, it managed to somehow trick everybody and managed to actually get all 3 in very acceptable capacities. So, a little bit of spawn camping here, but the match was literally already over. Well, effectively literally already over. And so there wasn't really anything left to do, so I said screw it. I don't normally spawn camp, to be honest. It's just not me, but it does happen in cases like this. So until next time, goodbye and farewell. Oh, one thing I forgot to go and mention real quick. The skins you see me use, with the exception of one of the clips for the M2A4, are all custom skins that I made based off some pictures I found of the vehicles. So I will be posting those onto War Thunder Live for anyone who wishes to go ahead and download and use those. But now, when I say I will see you all next time, I do in fact actually mean it. So until next time, goodbye and farewell.